Hello and welcome. You are joining us live for the Investor Lab once again. Hello, Gabby. How are you today?
Hello, Goose.
Hello.
I am well. Sorry, I'm concentrating so hard on this fade. Not that anyone cares. The software has changed and it throws me a little bit. Who'd have thought?
Gavin, great to see you.
Hey, Gavin.
Great to see you there in the chat.
Welcome.
Guys, if you're here joining us live, let us know. Say hello in the chat. We'd love to see you. We'd love to be here with you. We'd love to be live with you. That's why we do it live. Otherwise, we could just record this thing any old time we want. Maybe on a Wednesday evening, just ship it.
Oh.
But we want to be here with you. We want to be here with you guys. Rich, great to see you. Hey, crew. Matthew Pitt, good on ya.
Hello.
Good to see you. Afternoon. Great to see a few people trickling in here today. Hitesh, nice to see you.
Guys.
So, Gabby, I'm excited for today's topic. I'm excited to get into it. Where do you want to start with this?
Well, I think it's interesting because you're saying that we're excited. It's quite a heavy topic. I'll just preface the episode.
Yeah.
It is. We need to be realistic about it. We're talking about some heavy stuff.
Don't let my facial expressions dictate your behaviors. No. I was just thinking.
Facial expression.
No, come on. Just thinking. Go on. Go.
No, so it's like it's exciting to talk about, I think, because like you've been spending a lot of time, like we're going to present a thesis on what is going to happen over the next 20 years, right? It is a thesis, but you have been working on it a lot. And so I'm excited for you to be able to share what you've been working on. And it kind of encapsulates a lot of the topics that we have been talking about over the last few months and presents them in a way of like, hey, this is our hypothesis of what might be changing in the world over the next few years. Because I'm sure everybody feels it's quite tumultuous at the moment. I think everyone's feeling that like stress and like what's happening and a bit of lack of vision of what is potentially coming for the rest of our society. And so hopefully this can help to give some tangibility to that.
Yeah, so I agree. And so it is a very big topic. So what we're going to be talking about today is a thesis that I have called the prosperity wave. Now, you mentioned something there, Gabby, that we all kind of feel something. We all kind of feel that there's something happening, that we're moving towards something. Yeah, and there seems to be a consensus or some kind of like, what I would say is like some kind of like, psychological agreement, like across like a whole bunch in different ways, that we're moving towards some kind of a crescendo somewhere around 2030. That's what it feels like. I think that's what it feels like to a lot of people. Now, there's a lot of, this sort of like woo-woo stuff saying that, 2027 is supposed to be some big year and all of this kind of, there's a lot of different ideas right here, but there's also economic kind of forces driving towards 2030 as well. And there seems to be this general feeling that we're moving towards 2030 being some sort of tipping point moment in some way. And I don't think anyone can really define it. And whether it's economically, politically, socially, all of these kind of things, I think we all kind of feel that. And look, maybe it's just unit bias. Maybe it's just because we think, in a base 10 math system, and so everything's divisible by 5 and 10. And so we go, okay, well, 2030, that's like the end of a decade and the start of a new one, just in the same way that the end of the year, like there's no difference between December 31st and January 1st, realistically, right? Other than like, oh, it's a new year, but we've just decided that construct. And so whether or not there's some kind of real pragmatic, definable things are going to 2030 is going to be some transition point or not, is an interesting idea. But I have been putting quite a lot of thought into this whole idea, because we're in a period of time where prosperity is not equally distributed. We're in a period of time where asset holders and asset owners are becoming wealthy and consumers are becoming poor. We're seeing a lot more class divide. And before I go tangentially into that, because it kind of touches on the first part of the thesis, I started to really think about like, where is all of this going? Like we're in this kind of era of radical monetary expansion, fiscal dominance, is another way to put it, where governments are driving monetary expansion growth as opposed to monetary dominance, which is driven by central banks. So we're in a kind of fiscal dominance period. Monetary, or money supply is expanding rapidly. Sovereign debt crises are looming. All of this kind of stuff, and we naturally have to ask ourselves, well, where does this end, and where are we going, and what are we trying to achieve, and what are we, what's the timeline for this? What happens? And for a really long time, because I have been thinking about this for several years. In fact, I've been thinking about all of this kind of stuff. Like, I haven't been able to practically see beyond 2030, because when you sort of go, okay, so where does this go? AI is speeding up. We could have AGI by the end of this year or next year, ASI maybe next year or the year after. And realistically, if you have artificial general intelligence or artificial super intelligence, like what is money? Like what is, like when AI can trade the stock market faster and better, smarter than everybody else, it captures all of the gains and profits and returns. So what even is investing? What is capital? What is capital accumulation? What is the meaning of money? If AI causes tremendous amounts of deflation and governments just print money and debase currencies in a way that they cease to have value, like what happens then? If AI starts to take over, is money even the appropriate currency? Should we actually should the appropriate currency be kilojoules, not dollars and yen and pounds and stuff like that? Should it actually be something else? And you look at the convergence of technology, money, macroeconomics, social demographics, all of this kind of stuff, and you sort of realize that everything's sort of coming to a point in some way, and it's probably somewhere around 2030. And for me, I couldn't really quantify why I consistently felt like it was 2030, but I did. And also, it was a shared view that a lot of other people have got as well, that sort of it seems like 2030 is sort of the point. But then also, what happens after 2030? Like, I don't know. Nobody's talking about what happens after that, and where does this go? And we talk about AI as being both a, massively like a force for abundance, but also a force for disruption. And then how do these ideas dovetail with each other? In fact, have you got that question that got sent through? I know I said I didn't know where we were going to. Do you happen to just randomly have that ready after I said, "Hey, I don't know what we're going to do with it. Come back to it
If you
later."
give me a moment, I can. If you want to fill the gap. La la la. As you're coughing,
Yes.
perfect.
Yeah, so perfect time. So guys, I'm still a little ill, so you'll have to excuse me if I accidentally cough whilst we're recording here. But there's a paradox there, like the paradox is that technology is moving faster and faster and faster. That should alleviate most of the challenges that we have as a society. But it's also going to displace us in a very large sense. It's going to cause a huge amount of disruption. But then it also should be delivering us abundance. And how do these ideas go together? And we had a question here from Dane who wrote in. I'll read the question out. He said, "Hi, Goose and Gabby. Great episodes on AI. Goose mentioned a few times that governments will print money to match/offset the level of productivity improvement as a result of AI to protect the fiat debt-based system. True, fact. Well, certainly that is my belief. This would effectively nullify all the benefits of AI to the everyday person, correct? As goods and as the price of goods would stay the same as they are today, somewhat. It'll be unevenly distributed, but broadly true. But then Goose also says that AI improvements will lead to prosperity and abundance as prices will fall, despite everyone losing their jobs. That goods and services despite everyone losing their jobs, the goods and services will fall to the marginal cost of production and be extremely cheap for everyone to afford, even if they are no longer working. How do you reconcile these two ideas as they seem to be in opposition to one another?" And it's a really poignant question, and it is one of the big paradoxes. We could probably take that off the screen now.
Yep.
It's one of the big paradoxes that we have to contend with, that we wrestle with. It's like, so AI is going to deliver prosperity and abundance, but it's also going to rob us of the means to generate capital, because when labor is no longer required for capital formation, what like how does labor get capital? So it's one of the most interesting questions that I pondered all the time, and it originally came from an Imad Mostak blog. When capital no longer needs labor, how does labor get capital, right? Or how does attain capital? And it's a very important question, because if everything falls to the marginal cost of production and we have demand destruction, then you have Jevons paradox as well, which is kind of like the cheaper things become, the more consumption we have, and all these kind of things. But necessarily there's complexity and confusion in what this pathway looks like. And it's reasonable to assume that it's not going to be some smooth and cohesive transition. Like these are competing ideas that necessarily fall in conflict with each other. And so I've been kind of thinking about this for a couple of years. Like what happens, like what are the forces that are going to drive the world between here and 2030? But then also what happens after 2030? And do we fall into chaos? Is it going to be a dystopian future or a utopian future? Is AI going to kill us all? I don't think so. I think, well, it's non-zero. It's non-zero, but I don't think that's likely. And by the way, the reason I don't think that's likely is because there's a huge correlation between intelligence and empathy. And as people and societies get smarter, they tend to act less violently. Like when you're a kid and you're not very intelligent, you might see ants and just stomp on them for fun. Stomp, 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 crush the ants. When you become more intelligent and your brain and your faculties develop more, you see ants and you go, why would I want to just kill something mindlessly? I wouldn't want to. I don't want to cause harm. So there tends to be a really strong correlation between increasing intelligence and decrease in violence and increase in empathy and all of that kind of stuff. And so I think if you think about a super intelligent system developing, it's more likely to become more empathetic and more understanding over time and less violent, less prone to violence. Not to say that there couldn't be accidental misprogrammings where it's optimizing for something which could be the destruction of the human race. But I think that, that's kind of a P-doom scenario, which is a non-zero possibility, but I don't think that's not the thesis that I've got in my mind. And so I've been really thinking a lot about this, like where are we now? Where are we going? And what happens next? And I developed a thesis that I called the prosperity wave. And I started talking to you about this a few weeks back, actually. And the broad idea with the prosperity wave is that there's three phases in the prosperity wave. The first wave, we are currently about halfway through, right? And the first wave broadly started in 2020. Now, you could argue that it started in 2008. You could also argue that it started in 1971 when we went off the gold standard. But for the purposes of understanding the context of this conversation, I think 2020 is a good starting point. In 2020, that was really when massive monetary M2 supply growth really started to take off. That's when we really started accelerating the total amount of liquidity in the system, and it started to really pump asset prices, post-COVID, all of that kind of stuff, huge amounts of money printing across the globe. And that really started us on a path of what I call the mirage of prosperity. So this is the first phase. And this first phase in the prosperity wave, and by the way, my thesis around the prosperity wave is that it goes from about 2020 to 2045 and beyond, right, realistically. But being at 2025 now, we're about halfway through phase one, because phase one goes from about 2020 to about 2029, 2030-ish. Now, none of this is an exact science. What I've done is I've tried to combine thinking around political cycles, debt refinancing cycles, macroeconomic trends, AI development trends, all of this kind of stuff, and try to pull it together into one kind of like intertwined, cohesive idea. And so there's three phases in the prosperity wave. The phase one is the mirage of prosperity, which I'll come back to and explain a little bit more. And that's broadly from 2020 to 2029, 2030, 2031, something like that. Then there's the Great Prosperity Reset, which is 2029 to 2037. And then there's the Prosperity Renaissance, which is 2037 to 2045. And so we're half or a little bit more than halfway through phase one as I see it. And phase one started in 2020 when we started printing shitloads of money and pumping asset prices up. And that's also when people really started to lose faith in the social contract. The social contract being that if you got educated and worked hard, you could prosper. And this is actually why I call the first phase the mirage of prosperity, because and there's a lot of kind of research around this, and I've produced an entire report on this, which will explain how to get later. Um, but there's a lot of research around people losing faith in the fabric of the social construct, losing faith in government, losing faith that they're actually going to get ahead. There was
Mhm.
a research study. Let me just quickly find it. In 2023, only 40% of people globally believe they'd be better off in 5 years. And really, really, most of this bifurcation or disconnect really started to happen in 2020 when we had a K-shaped economy. Now, a K-shaped economy is when the top portion of the populace, the wealthier people the rich become richer and the poor become poorer, basically, right? You end up with a bifurcation. And so, but the social contract has remained, and that social contract broadly has been: if you get a good education and if you work hard, you can achieve the life you want. You can achieve prosperity. Prosperity being defined as living a good quality life, better than your parents, right? That your prosperity is going to be greater than the previous generation. You'll be able to take care of your parents and take care of your children. Your children will be able to be better off than you will be, and you'll be able to, be healthy, happy, start a family, and be part of a thriving community. And the reason I call the first phase the mirage of prosperity is because in this phase, it's become obvious that for the vast majority of people, prosperity is a mirage. It's something that
Mm.
they see on the horizon, that they're still pedaling towards, they're running towards, they're doing everything to grind towards this shimmering vision of prosperity that sits on the horizon. But the fact of the matter is they'll never get there. They'll never get there because money printing is happening faster than wage growth. Asset prices are accelerating faster than wage growth. Standard of living is falling. It's getting harder to get ahead. People are not having kids because they can't afford to have kids, and that's part of the reason that there's population decline. Fertility is another reason, but that's a different topic. And so people are still running towards this idea that they can achieve prosperity through the fruits of their labor. They will achieve prosperity, and that is becoming not true. And that social contract that's existed for generations is breaking down. And we're about halfway through that process. And I think more and more people are starting to see that prosperity that they've hoped for, that they've aimed for, that they believed was going to be theirs, is potentially not going to happen. And that's why we're starting to see more social disconnect, more more populism rising up in different parts of the economy and parts of the world, all of that kind of stuff. And really, this phase as well, the part of the other reason I called it the mirage of prosperity, is
Mm.
because we can see some people are getting ahead. Some people are becoming fantastically wealthy. And so you're looking around, you're like, okay, people are getting rich. This whole system still works. There are people getting rich. The system still works. Okay, cool. It must just be me. And so people keep fighting to get ahead in a system that is fundamentally broken and designed to keep people poor. And so
Mm.
we're in the middle of this phase now. But before I kind of continue on, do you have any kind of thoughts around this, Gabby? Because you've read the thesis.
I have read the thesis. Yeah, I think with this phase, like you said, we're coming towards the tail end of it, right?
Yep.
And it's a good culmination of, like I said, everything that I think everyone has been feeling, that tension since 2020, basically. Um, but something I want to kind of emphasize is that if we think through that K-shaped economy, if you're in a situation now, particularly as we talk through the rest of the episode, towards the end, we always try to bring it back to practicality and like things that you can do. But as we talk through the rest of the episode, if you start to feel a bit of panic come out because maybe you're not in a position that you had hoped you would be, or maybe you feel a bit defeated in your capabilities, I need you to remember that a lot of this is not your fault. Like, it's not,
Yeah.
a lot of this is because the system is not designed for you to win transparently. It's designed in a way to just kind of like keep things afloat, and it's not to help individuals to succeed. And so if you're in a situation where you're feeling deflated about the whole thing,
Mm.
just don't, you can't wear that as I'm a failure in that sense. We need to just kind of like, one of the key things that I attribute to leadership is being able to confront the brutal facts of the situation And that's really what this is about. We need to just take stock of what is happening and the way things are likely to go, and just kind of like let go of all of the baggage that we feel around it, and pragmatically move forward.
Yeah, totally. I don't want anyone to see this as a negative thing, by the way.
Mm-mm.
Like, all of this is positive because if you understand this information, you're early and you've got a head start anyway.
Absolutely. Yep.
So none of this should be viewed as doomsday-ish, negative. The world's going to end. That is not the point. That is absolutely not the point of any of this conversation. The facts are that
Mm.
we are in a bifurcating economy where
Mhm.
asset owners are getting wealthier and consumers are getting poorer. They are facts. That's not an opinion. That is a fact. That
Yep.
is the environment in which you live. And that is driven primarily by monetary expansion. Cool.
Yep.
Got it. Perfect. So if you understand the environment you're in, you can work out how to play the game. But then you also need to understand where is the puck going to go, you know, because you want to skate to where the puck is going, so to speak. I can't remember where that quote came from, but you know the idea, right?
Mighty Ducks, probably.
Probably Mighty Ducks. Probably Mighty Ducks. Probably the Mighty Ducks. One moment, sorry.
All good.
So to that degree, so we're in this moment in time now where we're sort of halfway through the first phase. And if you understand the environment you're in and you understand how to play this first phase, you can set yourself up for the next two phases, right? And so whilst none of this should be alarmist, it should actually increase your sense of urgency, okay?
Mhm.
Because I think that we have roughly 4 or 5 years left to position ourselves financially, spiritually, emotionally, economically, in all of these ways for what is going to be a transitionary future and a changing future. Now, so let me talk through the phases and let's talk what to do about it, because maybe I'll spend a little less time going deep into the phases. And by
Mhm.
the way, guys, if you're listening to this, I would love for you to ask questions about this because there's going to be a lot of stuff to unpack here.
Yep.
And so please just drop questions into the chat. Feel free to ask questions. We'll try and get to them. So phase one is the Mirage of prosperity, and that's pretty much driven by synthetic growth from monetary expansion, driving asset prices up, making asset owners wealthier and making consumers poorer. And that is happening across the globe, and that is causing a fracturing. It's causing a breakdown of the social contract, which is that if you get a good education, work hard, you can achieve prosperity for yourself and your family. That's breaking, and people are starting to notice. And
Mhm.
so what is likely to happen over the next, say, 4 or 5 years is an acceleration of that, an acceleration of money printing. Why? Because because of the sovereign debt crisis that is looming, because of the fact that, you know, we have a 350% debt to GDP ratio on the planet, the fact that governments need to continue to print in order to be able to maintain their own economic stability, because AI is going to drive massive inflation. And so money printing is likely to increase in speed, not decrease in speed. And that is going to create more of the situation we currently have, which is more monetary expansion, more asset price growth, and more loss of purchasing power in real terms, which means in real terms negative wage growth, which means that unless you are investing, you're getting left behind. Now, I think that this is going to reach a crescendo somewhere around 2029 to 2031. Now, why did I pick 2029 in the thesis? So the reason I picked 2029 in the thesis is that it broadly aligns with US political cycles. Now, the
Mhm.
US political cycle is not the be all and end all, but given that the US dollar is the primary, the reserve currency of the global reserve currency, and given that they are the world's largest economic power, and all of that, and given the influence they have on the rest of the world, US political cycles do matter, and they have tended to correlate with a lot of other parts of preceding parts of the wave and all of that kind of stuff. And so Donald Trump, and this is not I'm not here to make a political statement about Donald Trump in any way, shape, or form, but he was inaugurated in 2025, right? So play that out for another 4 years. That's 2029, right? So it's reasonable to assume that a different leader of the US is going to be in place in 2029. Now, does that mean that I think there'll be an immediate change and an immediate transition to a different kind of social economical structure in 2029? No, I don't know. Maybe the same political party is going to get into power. Maybe JD Vance gets into power. Or maybe by that point, social discontent has reached a zenith and people want to push for something else. Maybe a totally different type of political power comes into play. Maybe it is more like the guy, I can't remember his name, who's just recently won the primaries for, I said in a previous episode, he became the mayor of New York, but he hasn't, not the mayor, he just won the primaries, right? So whatever. But this whole idea that the direction we're going, the direction capitalism is going is going to push more people to seek socialism, and that could create significant change in the system.
Mhm.
So one way or another, I think that through rising social discontent, natural political cycles, natural debt refinancing cycles, the acceleration of money printing, the acceleration of technology, I think we're going to reach some kind of crescendo around 2029 to 2031. So we could call that 2030 if you want. Now, from there, I think that we're going to have a period of social, economic, and political upheaval. Now, what I don't think is going to happen is something like the Great Depression. Now, a lot of people look at this and actually recognize it's a very similar timeline to the 1900s. In 1929, the Great Depression started, and then it collapsed into the 2030s, and then it was around about 2037-ish that things started to improve again. That is not the basis of this idea. That is coincidental in my mind. I haven't drawn direct connections to that and said, okay, well, that happened then, therefore this will happen now. That is not the idea at all. My thinking around these timelines is based specifically on other inputs and factors, like how long do I think it would take for us to experience social change? Because technological change is moving very, very fast, but change can only move at the speed of people, not at the speed of technology. So when we're talking about massive social shifts, there has to be a certain amount of time to digest it. Now, originally, the thesis I drew out was 2025 to 2030 to 2035 to 2040. And then I realized that was probably firstly, this started before 2025. And B, it'll probably take more than 5 years for us to go through kind of like a social transformation.
Mm.
And then it'll probably be a longer crescendo back upwards, right? So what is likely to happen, and I call phase 2 the Great Prosperity Reset. And this is basically, to some degree, a reckoning phase where sovereign debt becomes unserviceable, currencies start to destabilize and become devalued, institutions start to fail and collapse. AI is going to displace, hundreds of millions of workers, billions even, perhaps. And when I lump robotics into that too, by the way, humanoid robotics is probably is all going to be part of it. Populist uprisings is going to become populist uprisings, and extremism will probably rise up as well. And there's also going to be what I call a crisis of meaning, where people who no longer have work and no longer have a place in society start to wonder how things work. So it's going to be a breakdown of social cohesion. And so I don't think that this is not just going to be like the Great Depression was really characterized by a financial collapse, right? Where there was a big financial crash and everyone became unemployed, right? And that was that. I don't think that this is just going to be one singular event, like there's going to be an economic crash. In fact, very significantly, I think a lot of assets will continue to melt upwards over this period. Like, I don't think that, I don't think that there's going to be some massive real estate market crash or something like that. I think that trust in currencies will break down, which is very different. I think that, institutions will start to break down. People if you look at politics in Australia, for example, people don't care anymore. People don't care anymore. People just don't care because all of the parties are basically the same. And they're about as rich as rich in kind of character as a cup of tea that you just dip the tea bag in for about 1 second. Like they are tepid, flavorless. They've got nothing going for them. There's nothing there. And so people also know that politicians just lie. They don't care. They're starting to lose faith.
That's the thing. Yeah, it's a corrosion of trust, right? Because I think that's when you determine that you don't care, because you may care, but then over time, like a bad relationship, if you keep just losing trust in that system's behavior, that it's going to get you where you want to go, you just go, you know what, I'm done.
You know what? It's a good point. And Lindsay has just said here, I'm not sure it's that people don't care, but they're definitely jaded. So let me rephrase my statement. People definitely care, but people are losing faith in the
story,
institution,
in the promise.
In the institution, right? In the promise, right? So, representative democracy represents the will of the people. The will of the people will prevail. Governments are there to serve the will of the people, and they'll deliver us to a better society. That whole idea is falling apart. Like people are like, no, they don't. They don't represent us. Like I can vote, but what's that going to do? They don't like. So people definitely care. In fact, so let me just make sure that I'm restating that. I don't think that there is an epidemic of apathy. I think that people are losing faith in the institutions, right? And I think that is going to also crescendo in and around the first, the start of the next decade and the first part of the next decade, where people are just going to say, this is not working for me anymore. The social contract is broken. I'm working harder and I'm not getting ahead. The political structure that I'm in is not representative of me and it does not serve me. The economic structure does not serve me anymore. This stuff doesn't work. Blake, I would. So we'll come back to that another time. People are losing faith in this, in the whole system. And that I think is the underpinning of the idea. And so I don't think that there's going to be some like big doomsday market crash scenario. What I think is going to happen is, as I've said, I think people will lose faith in currencies. They'll start to realize that the currencies that are printed by their governments are useless and worthless and don't get them anywhere. The governments themselves don't serve them properly and aren't doing what they should be doing. The social contract is broken. Institutions like the WHO, the IMF and all of that kind of stuff, they'll start to break down as well. Smaller countries like will have currency collapse sooner. So they will, they are going to feel the burden. We're going to see nation states collapse under the weight of broken structures and broken institutions put on them by places like the Bank of International Settlements, the WHO, the IMF. All of this kind of stuff is really going to start to break down. And so what we'll see is a multifaceted social, economic, psychological period of breakdown during the Great Prosperity Reset.
Yeah. I think what's interesting with this, particularly as we're saying, like it's different to a pure economic crisis, something like the Great Depression, is all of these different systems. And I think we can all, again, we can sense that, right? I think because when people start to lose faith in something, they generate curiosity. And particularly it's like people are seeking meaning. People want to have understanding of what's happening to them in their situations. So if you think through like education, not very little faith in education as an institution currently, and I imagine that's only going to get more and more momentum. Health as well, a lot of people don't have any trust in the medical systems anymore, and there's all of these different systems that have held our society together for decades, hundreds, thousands of years. People are now questioning, and whether that's because they've got more access to information, I think it's a combination of the centralized systems have been failing and have been corroding trust through their actions. And then the people are getting more access to information and more curiosity to try and figure this out. And we're just, like we said, it's not, we don't care. It's that we're just kind of like fed up with it. So it has to, all of this does eventually need to crescendo at some point, right? So otherwise, what's the end point?
Exactly. What's the end point, right? So, and you touched on a great point there. Like education, again, it's another institution that is failing. Like people don't have faith in the education system anymore, and they don't believe that it is genuinely most people don't believe that it is the best thing for their kids, but they need to do it because they need to go to work. It forms
Yeah, they
the
need the
prime, like,
childcare.
yeah, they want their kids to socialize, and they effectively
Yeah.
need the childcare so they can go to work. But if you asked them, did they think that the current education system is actually going to give them the best education? Universally, it would almost be no, right? So,
Mm.
so that breaking down, I mean, you know, like so much of this stuff. I mean, I was talking to someone the other day. They got a couple of kids, and they've got to put them in childcare, and it's costing them $30,000 a year just for childcare. It's crazy, right? So, like all of these things, healthcare, again, it's another scenario where, you know, the institution or the idea of healthcare in Australia, for example, is great. This whole idea of like Medicare, free healthcare, free education, these ideas have permeated through as good. But in practice, anyone who's participating in those systems recognizes that it's a total crock. Like, it is not
Mm.
good. It's not serving anyone. And that's, you know, my mum's into medical, in the, you know, has, you know, she's part of the you know, was a nurse for like 30 years or whatever. Right. So I see it from their side. My dad's got disabilities and stuff like that. And so, you know, that even they are saying like, this is crazy. Like, you can't get the help you need and all of that kind of stuff. So this stuff starts to break down, and you start to see it across so many different layers of our society. You know, there's more and more people are seeking to leave Australia, by the way, because they're just like, hey, it's overtaxed and overregulated. It's not worth it anymore. It's not worth it for me. And this is not an Australian problem. This is not a US problem. This is not a European problem. This is a global problem. This is a situation that's happening everywhere. You know, there's a housing crisis in Canada. There's a housing crisis in Germany. There's a housing crisis in many other parts of Europe. There are housing crisis in Australia. You know, there's housing crises in so many places. You know, and you know, the pension has broken down. That's no longer a thing. So the government's not going to take care of you in your old age. As Blake has rightly pointed out, the super is also breaking down. And so necessarily we have to go through a phase of transition. Like, the old world has to be burnt down in order to make space for the new. Now, what I will reiterate is I'm not sitting here saying, oh my God, doomsday, everyone's got till 2030, then the world's going to collapse and
Mm.
everyone's screwed and everyone's going to lose all their money but necessarily for you to change, there must be friction. There is no change without friction. It does not happen. If you are unfit and you want to get fit, guess what? The process of getting fit is pretty painful. It's pretty challenging, right? If you're addicted to alcohol and you want to achieve sobriety, going through that is a lot of friction. It is hard. And any system that must change from one version of itself to a new version of itself must go through a phase of friction. And in fact, this is actually one of the problems with politics, is that they're not willing to go through those phases of friction because they run
Yeah.
on 4-year political cycles and they're too worried about getting reelected. And so what they do is they keep the alcoholic, just keep giving them more alcohol and hoping they'll eventually work it out. But it doesn't end well. None of this ends well unless you're on the right path. And so I think it'll take, you know, 5 to 7 to 8 years for us as a people, as a society, globally, not just Australians, to transition and to work through that friction. Now, I don't know exactly how that will play out. Some people think that there might be conflict. There might be. There also might not be, by the way. So, like, it's very easy to jump to war. It's very easy to jump to like, oh, there's going to be some World War III scenario. There might not be. You know, like as societies have progressed, more and more people recognize that large scale warfare is not good, not good for the world, right? And so there's a tendency towards avoidance of large scale conflicts. It doesn't mean that there wouldn't be other kind of conflicts like cyber conflicts or, you know, cold wars and all
Mm-hmm.
of that kind of stuff. Like, you know, there's definitely other ways that, you know, geopolitical, economic wars and stuff like that, for sure. Like, you know, like could the BRICS try and rise up and topple the US dollar for global currency supremacy? Potentially, you know, there's lots of other ways that conflict can happen without it being outright hot war with like guns and bombs and stuff like that. That's not to say there'll be none of that, but I also don't think that that's like the most obvious case. I think the most obvious scenario is that there's going to be civil and social unrest for sure, that there's probably likely to be mass protests, maybe riots, maybe even in some cases civil wars, hopefully not for long. Um, I think that there's going to be a significant social health issues, mental health issues, as people struggle to understand how to adapt to a new and changing world. We saw that in 2020 when people weren't able to go to work. Now, 2019, 2020 during the COVID period, that was a little different because a lot of people were locked inside their houses, right? And so they were like, not only were they locked out of their ability to connect and find meaning in their work, they were also, in many cases, locked in to their home, and that was really bad for their mental health. But you see what happens when you take the ability to experience the world out of people's hands. They get really challenged by it. Yes, there was a massive spike in mental health issues, also a massive spike in extremism and populism and all of that kind of stuff that happens. And I think that was just a little taste test of what is likely to happen through the kind of the first half of the 2030s, through 2029 through 2037 ish.
Yeah.
And again, I think it's a necessary cleansing. And when I say cleansing, don't misunderstand me. Like, I don't mean a social cleansing in some kind of like genocidal kind of way. What I mean is like a cleansing of the old system and removing of the plaque that is getting in the way of us achieving everything that we want. The things that will march on through that period is technological progress. That won't slow down. Technological progress will continue to rapidly race ahead. To the degree that currencies continue to be used, they will continue to be devalued, and in nominal terms, asset holders will still, get wealth, hold wealth, carry wealth, make wealth. Like, there'll be a lot of things that will continue on. It's not going to be the world on fire, but it will be the world going through a whole bunch of transitionary pain, and it's going to feel pretty tough, particularly if you're not prepared for it. Before we go on to the next phase, is there anything you wanted to talk about phase 2, the Great Prosperity Reset?
I think, again, like through this period, the word that comes to mind is leadership. And I think particularly people that, are part of this community, we all have this opportunity to step up and to lead other people around us. And I know that we're saying that hopefully there won't be some social cleansing, but I do get concerned at this stage of like, because when people feel lost as a collective, oftentimes a really strong extremist, in often cases, leader will step up to take charge because collectives crave leadership in that sense. And so I don't know what that would look like, but on a micro level, it's still true as well. Like, if your community, you can imagine if everyone is going through a really stressful time, someone just wants someone to give them some guidance on how to move through it. And so I think this is a really good opportunity, regardless of like your financial situation. When we get to this phase in a couple of years,
Yeah,
you will have more understanding that you can teach and you can lead other people as well through it as well. So I think that's just something to anchor into. It's like people are going to crave leadership. What can we do to show up and provide that, regardless of our financial situation?
I've just realized we haven't shared the graphic on the screen. Do you want to grab the graphic and share the graphic of the prosperity wave on the screen?
I would love to.
Because we haven't shown that. So
no, here we go.
So this is a visual representation of the prosperity wave, and so what you'll notice is that it crescendos in 2029 on an upward trajectory, and then we have. And by the way, this is not an economic representation. This is a prosperity representation, right? So this takes into consideration all of the different aspects of, well-being, social cohesion, all of that kind of stuff. Then. So phase 1 is 2020 to 2029, and then 2029 to 2037. And then what you will see is a rapid increase in prosperity from there. And that's what I call phase 3, the prosperity renaissance. Now, I don't think it goes from 2037 to 2045. I think it goes to 2045 and beyond. And this is how we start to close the paradox between the ideas of AI creating huge amount of disruption, because a lot of the disruption that is going to happen in phase 2, the Great Prosperity Reset, is going to be driven by the fact that there's a huge amount of, through the gains of productivity, there's going to be employer, unemployment, and people are going to be economically displaced and all of that kind of stuff. This is all going to contribute. But given the speed of progress with artificial intelligence and productivity and technology, I think that by the time we get to 2037, we will have consumed and digested and worked through the social changes that need to happen. Hello, Dr. Chen Z. Nice to see you here, by the way. And we will start to move into the rebirth phase, the phase
Mm.
where we can start to rebuild a society based around a new set of systems, a new set of values, and a new set of technological infrastructure. And I think that this is where we are going to enter into the greatest period of abundance and prosperity, and much and more importantly, more evenly distributed prosperity than we've ever experienced in our species ever before. So if you think about phase one as being the mirage of prosperity, where it's been driven by monetary expansion, and some people are getting extremely wealthy and some people are not, and there's a bifurcated kind of system, and the social contract is breaking down. Then we hit roughly 2029, 2030, and then we have a social transformation period where we change from the old system to the new system, old political structures to new political structures, old governance structures to new governance structures, old economic structures to new economic structures, old social structures to new social structures, all of that kind of stuff. And then through the benefit of the technologies and the change and everything we've moved towards, we can move towards a collectively better system. That is what is going to carry us forward on a path of greater prosperity and greater abundance and greater fulfillment than we've ever experienced ever before. I think that during that phase, we'll move to things like, and this is all hypothetical, obviously, but some of the ideas that I've got around this is that governance is going to shift towards decentralized, auditable, and transparent models. So rather than the current systems we've got, which have got a bunch of old people sitting around in a room, most of them falling asleep half the time, making bad decisions, we can move to AI driven governance. In fact, the UAE has already integrated
Mm.
AI into its governance systems. So we could have AI enabled, decentralized, auditable, network based social social constructs. AI automation and biotech is going to reduce the cost of survival and the cost of living dramatically. So we'll have increased longevity, but we'll also have increased access to goods, services, and all of that kind of stuff. So the cost to produce a banana might go down to like 1 cent or something like that, or basically free. And so services, goods and services that we want for our everyday living, the marginal cost of production will have fallen to basically zero. There'll be other ways that we need to think about economic interactions. But like if we kind of think about this, a world where we have decentralized government, right, where everyone can interact with the kind of like we have like a network-based society that is on the blockchain, that is auditable, decentralized, and AI enabled. We have easy access to all of the things we need to live a basic and good, when I say basic, I don't just mean like bread and water. I mean like a sustainably good quality life. um health span's going to expand, all of that kind of stuff. It becomes very, very interesting, because then you think about like what are the economic rewards. Like people talk about things like universal basic income, and I think that's interesting. But like right now we have universal basic infrastructure, because like what is universal basic income? Universal basic income is like, oh, the government's just going to give everyone money to live. But last I checked, you were driving around on roads that the government paid for as well, right? So we already have like
Mm.
universal basic infrastructure. So really, what are we talking about? We're talking about a system, or a governance structure or a system that would be enabled to provide us with the things that we need in order to live a good, prosperous, happy, comfortable life, right? Which doesn't mean jets and boats and stuff like that, but it means good quality life. And so the question would be like, how would that happen? And potentially the currency changes, or the medium of exchange changes more towards energy. And so maybe governments are rewarded by their ability to add energy to a globally decentralized energy grid, or to be able to contribute meaningfully to the expansion of information technology on the planet. Because realistically, the things that are going to hold AI back are going to be things like energy infrastructure primarily, and data, data distribution and stuff. And so if you could contribute to that, so let's say you're a little country like Bhutan, if you could produce more energy than you need and you can ship that back to the grid, then you could be trading that economically to then get the equipment needed to build better roads and better healthcare facilities in the country. And so the exchange becomes very different because it can become globally decentralized. I also think that let me just bring up a couple of things here because I've got a few notes that I just want to find. So there's a few things that I think are going to happen in phase 3, which I think are really interesting. Blockchain-based governance. Cities and communities can use open ledgers for budgets, votes, and contracts. Decentralized autonomous organizations can manage cooperative infrastructure, replacing bureaucracy with auditable smart contracts. We can have AI audited institutions. So public finances may be continuously reviewed by open source AI auditors. Government data sets could be verified on chain to prevent manipulation. This would restore legitimacy through verifiability, not blind trust. We could have network-based politics. So political power may shift from centralized nation states to local resilience networks and global digital alliances. Communities aligned by values, not geography, could coordinate transnationally to address shared challenges from climate resilience to AI ethics. Self-sovereign identity. Individuals may control portable, cryptographically secure IDs across platforms, governments, and communities. This unlocks fluid citizenship and participation without reliance on fragile centralized registries. And a big one for me, which I think can happen because of all of this too, is freedom of movement and global citizenship. As blockchain-based identity systems and network citizenship models mature, the concept of geographically restricted nationality may begin to erode. People may be able to move more freely between jurisdictions with identity, credentials, and even services following them across borders. Visa regimes may soften in favor of programmable permissions and network-based governance agreements. And this could mark the rise of a new paradigm, sovereignty with mobility, a form of global citizenship embedded in the architecture of decentralized systems. Now, some people may freak out with the idea of like, oh my God, everything would be digital and everyone would be able to see all my shit. But actually think about it a little bit differently. Everyone already can, by the way, right? So if you're on the internet and you have a Google account or a Meta account or anything like that, guess what? But they see all your shit anyway. So, grow up. The other part of it is, imagine if you could have freedom of movement, and by the entering into any country, you would adopt whatever the socio-political economic situation was in that country. All right. So let's say you're like, hey, I just want to move to Thailand for 6 months. All right. And you have a digitally cryptographically sound identification system, which is probably based on biometrics and all of that other kind of stuff as well. You have your wealth tied to it. You have everything tied to it in a cryptographically secure way that's decentralized and not hackable by government and not non-confiscatable and all of that kind of stuff, but verifiable, right? Which is the most important part. And then you could say, hey, I want to move to Thailand for a month. And they say, great. Okay. Then select this option as you pass through the immigration gate. You will now be part of the Thai tax system for 6 months. Great. Thank you very much. And then it's like, oh, hey, I want to go to Portugal for 6 months. Great. You select this option on the way through the Portugal immigration. You're now part of the Portugal tax system for the time that you're here. You can have all of these ways where you can opt in and out of different parts of the global economy. And this could all be enabled by better technological systems. And so, I think that would lead to a more unified world, a world where people will have more acceptance, more tolerance, more understanding, more accessibility, where things like education and healthcare and longevity and prosperity generally become more evenly distributed, whether it be across the, what they call the global South. So Africa, Asia, all of these kind of places, South America, all of these places will become better off. And we'll see a better distribution of equality across everywhere. And I think we're going to move from a state of scarcity to a state of abundance. Now, I don't think it's going to be smooth sailing to get there, but I think on the other side of it, so I think it's like things get good, things get bad, things get awesome or things get good, things get less good, or things get good, things get challenging, things get awesome is probably the way that I would think about it in this transition. And I think that it's more likely that we will end up in a prosperous, abundant state than we will in a kind of dystopian future. Not to say that it's going to be hard to, it's not going to be painful to get there, but I think that's where we can end up. What do you think about that?
Can I, if I act as devil's advocate for a second?
Go for it.
So obviously we're talking about this phase 3. It sounds quite, as we're talking about, prosperous.
Yep.
Now, the cost to get there is phase 2, which is likely to be a very challenging period. So there's a cost before we get to this utopia. So if it sounds too good to be true, remembering that there's a
Yeah.
significant period of hardship to get to that point. But I also think through, like, it sounds good, but surely there will be someone that comes across to try and take control of these systems. Because again, we're coming from this, like, currently we have very centralized systems. And in this utopian kind of phase 3, it's more decentralized.
Yeah.
And when I think about this in terms of like, okay, but there's still surely some dickhead's gonna come across and go like, I'm gonna control the whole thing,
Yeah.
because that's what tends to happen. But how I don't know if this is the right train of thought, and you can maybe feed into this, but
Keep going. Yep.
because we're coming from this fiat-based inflationary system
Yeah.
where greed is prevalent because of inflation, because people are trying to build their own selfish resources because they know that every day that they don't buy an asset, it's going to get more and more expensive.
Yeah.
Whereas if we get to a stage where we completely just break that system down and we end up in a deflationary economy,
Yeah.
are we likely to not experience that level of greed and corruption at the same level? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think that I think it'll be very different, right? I don't think
Yeah.
I think you're right in that. So if you go back even to like the 1950s, 1960s, stuff like that,
Mm,
investing wasn't as big of a thing. You didn't really need to. Like you could maybe, but people didn't really need to because through the fruits of their own labor, they could save their way to wealth and take care of their family, and there was a pension to retire on, and all of that kind of stuff.
mm,
As the system has broken down more, there's been
mm.
more of an incentive for self self-centered uh, activity, right? So I want
Yeah.
to get rich, right? Me. And that's driven fundamentally usually by good intentions. I want to take better care of my family. I want to take care of my future generations. I want to do this. I want to
Mhm.
leave things. I want to leave my family better than when I came into the world. That kind of stuff. So I don't think it's all negative. And I wouldn't sit there and say that people who are trying to become wealthy are in some way sort of greedy or bad or self-centered. I think
Mm-mm.
but I think the system is designed in a way that rewards that kind of stuff. I think it's true. Now, I don't know how that would translate in a future state where, in the kind of like phase 3 stage. I would imagine, though, that there's still be mechanisms for people who accrete greater value into the world to achieve greater outcomes. I would imagine that that would be true.
Mm.
I think, though, that that the transition phase from a broken fiat economy to it'll probably transition to more like a sound money economy, which will
Yep.
necessarily mean that the deflationary forces of technology will mean that the value will accrete to everyone because when deflation is allowed to take hold, and when you don't have a debt-based monetary system, if you can move off that to a sound money system, if deflation is allowed to take hold, then the marginal cost of goods and services for everyone falls to the marginal cost of production. So that means that that prosperity becomes more evenly distributed. That means, I'm not sure if you've seen it, but like I've seen stuff where in the US, like a medication for a cancer can cost 25,000 US dollars, but
Yeah.
the exact same, literally same box, same brand, exact same everything, same medication in the UK costs £12, right? And so, that's across between the US and the UK. But what about countries? What about countries in Africa? What about countries in Asia? And so, if we allow the natural state of the free market to prevail and the cost of goods and services falls to the marginal cost of production, that means abundance becomes evenly distributed henceforth. And so, that being said, I think that entrepreneurial people or people who want to add value will find ways to add value to the community and will be able to accrete
Mhm.
additional benefits to themselves in some ways. Maybe that is by providing greater leadership to their community and people rewarding them as a process of gratitude, or maybe it is because they can find another problem and solve it in some meaningful way, or whatever that is. But work in and of itself will probably transition to more of fulfillment-based work rather than work for the purposes of monetary accumulation. And I think it'll be very, very different. So I think that the system will have to change, because the current system, fiat-based, debt-based monetary system, doesn't work. And so necessarily, in order for us to achieve phase three, the prosperity renaissance, we necessarily must have a different system. And if it
Mm.
is a system that is not broken, like the fiat monetary system, then the reward structure or the incentive structure would necessarily be different. So therefore, we must expect there's going to be different outcomes. And I don't have all of the answers. But what I do believe is we'll move to a sound money system. What I do believe is that things like energy will probably become a much more dominant factor of currency, and maybe countries are going to be rewarded as part of a globally decentralized network by being more energy efficient. You made a point though about, like, what if there are some people who try and grab power, and in a sort of more decentralized world, there are some people who try and centralize and all of that kind of stuff. I think that if the tides of society are moving away from that, then they will become ostracized and isolated. I mean, you look at North Korea, for example, right? That's a great example. And so there will probably be people who want to create some populist slash extremist slash isolationist slash whatever you want to call it group. And it could be a whole country, or it could be a group of people within a country, or it could be a block of countries. It could be like maybe all of Europe says, no, we're going to act like this. But what I think will happen is that they will fall behind. So, systems have a way of regulating themselves. So one of the most interesting things I think about India is that India was for the last 1,000 years, India was for most of the last 1,000 years, India was the dominant economic force in the entire world. Crazy, right? Right now, one of the highest numbers of people in poverty in the world, right? And so what happened? What happened to India? Well, the thing that happened to India is they were on the silver standard, not the gold standard. That's what happened. So they backed the wrong system. They built their nation on the wrong foundation. They built it on a foundation of a silver standard, not a gold standard. Silver became easier to produce, and so the value of silver went down because more silver flooded into the market, and their wealth went down. And then a gold-backed country came in and dominated them and took over because they had more wealth. They could afford more military and do all of that kind of stuff. And so a similar thing happened with China, and there's been other examples of it as well. And so I think that there will be situations where countries will resist change, people will resist change, but I don't think that they will prevail. And by the way, I don't think that phase three is some magical utopia where there's no more problems. I think that what'll happen is the high watermark of the problems we can solve gets higher, right? So the problems we have today will be much more easily solved, and we'll just have to solve harder problems. So it's not going to be without challenges. It's not going to be without conflict. It's not going to be without friction. It's not going to be without any of this kind of stuff. But what is going to happen is our ability to solve the problems that we have today we're going to work through those, and then we're going to solve bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger problems. Like, how do we harvest energy from asteroids? How do we create globally connected but decentralized governance systems, right? Because no one likes the idea of a centralized, globalized government, right? Like, imagine if there was like one government who like ruled the world, like George Orwell, 1984. Jeez, I hope I haven't cooked that.
1984, yeah.
So, nobody wants that kind of Orwellian future. But if it's a decentralized, auditable, verifiable, network-based, all of that kind of stuff, these things change massively. Why wouldn't we want to be in a globally connected, decentralized world where we can solve problems in a better way? Plus, AI at the moment is already smarter than we are, and if we can lean into that and lean into the benevolence of intelligence, then I think that we have a positive future in front of us. Does that kind of ameliorate that your point?
Yeah, I think also, like, people have more power than they've ever had, like the people as a collective at the moment, I think, because we're in a global society now, and we're all much more connected than we were in the Great Depression. And I think there's less kind of blind control that these global powers are able to just enforce over us, particularly in the last 5 years or so.
Yep.
That people are not really going to stand for a lot of this stuff
Yeah.
anymore moving forward. Yeah.
Totally. People are already voting in that way, right? So like
Mhm.
people are already saying, I don't want to do this anymore. Like if you look at the UK, they've got a huge exodus of millionaires going out
Yeah.
of the UK.
Yeah.
If you
Voting
look at
with their feet.
Australia, there are more and more people that I know in Australia. Like, and I'm talking like not a couple of people. Like
Yeah.
lots of people I know are saying, you know what? Australia's not for me anymore. I'm
Yeah.
going to leave. Same thing's happening in the US, all of that kind of stuff. Like, and so people are voting with their feet. They're already making changes. It's already happening.
Yep.
Now, so I think that, and by the way, for those of you who are listening, I've prepared a 20-page or 22-page thesis on this. I am going to make some updates to it, and we're going to make it available to you so you can read the entire thesis. We'll talk about that in a minute. So stick around. I know we're an hour in, but by the time we get to the end of this episode, we're going to share something. It'll be a very special opportunity for you to join us and get access to that. But I want to talk just quickly about a couple of things. I want to talk about how to prepare for all of this. We think
Yeah.
this is really, really, really important.
Yep.
Because if we can just take on face value, and again, you can read my entire thesis on this and form your own opinions. But if we take it on face value that we've got 3 phases in the prosperity wave. Phase 1, we're about halfway through. Phase 2 will take us to sort of mid to late 2030s. That's going to be the great prosperity reset, and then we're going to have the prosperity renaissance, which will give us all of which will carry us forward into an abundant and prosperous future for everyone. If you believe broadly that is true, the question is, what do you do about it? Do you sit on your hands and do nothing? Do you freak out that there's going to be some major crash? Do you try and keep all your money in cash? No, right? So broadly, I think that we have a sense of urgency right now that you've got about 4 or 5 years left to get yourself into a position to be able to transition through phase 2 and land in phase 3 in a really good place to be. And there's 3, and we've talked about this before, but there's 3 assets that I think need to be in your kind of like sovereign portfolio or sovereign stack, as I like to think about it. And that's basically real estate. Now, let me put a caveat on this, right? So when I talk about real estate, I'm talking about Australian residential real estate. Not all real estate is created equal. Okay. So if you are living in Bangladesh, then owning real estate is less important than owning some of the other aspects in this stack. And so I think it needs to be contextualized as well. But broadly, it's Australian residential real estate, or let's just say real estate, because there's a couple of points I want to make on that. So the three asset types you need to own in order to be able to transition through this prosperity wave is real estate, Bitcoin, and disruptive technologies, disruptive technology equities or exponential age equities. And so the reason that those 3 are so important is they're all either outside or adjacent to the current fiat system, and they all benefit from both the collapse and the rebirth of a new system. So real estate is a high utility physical real world asset that people need because they need places to live, and so that's going to be beneficial to you long term. And if you think about going through phase 2, where there could be a lot of disruption, owning property where you could go if you needed to, or you could use to create some income or some utilities is actually going to be very, very useful. Bitcoin is a globally decentralized, anti-inflationary, sound money where you can preserve your economic energy and transport it through time and space. And I think that the more the system collapses, the more valuable Bitcoin is going to become.
Yep.
And disruptive technology equities is really placing a bet with the technology that is going to be transforming the world, and where value is going to accrete into those equities and those opportunities. And if you can develop a portfolio that is a sound combination of all 3 of those based on your geography, your personal risk, all of these kind of things, then you're going to put yourself in a pretty good position to be able to transition through these phases.
There's a question I wanted to ask you on this, because let's just say, again, people here probably, hopefully, have been listening to you and I have these conversations since the start of the year, talking about these 3 asset classes. And obviously they fit into this thesis perfectly.
Yeah.
But let's say that they've taken action. They've got real estate, they've bought Bitcoin, they've got some growth stocks. Is that like, do they need to do anything else? I'm thinking more through, like, is there any bad assets that they should actually be getting rid of, like bad asset classes?
Yeah. Bonds,
What are the
cash, fiat.
okay. Yeah.
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 Yeah. So yeah,
'Cause
bonds,
my
cash.
point
Yeah.
being,
Yeah.
like, if I'm sitting here listening to this and you're saying, "Here's how you prepare, guys. You need real estate, you need Bitcoin, you need growth stocks." And I look at my portfolio, I've got properties, I've got Bitcoin, I've got growth stocks, but I also
I
have
wouldn't call them growth stocks, just to be clear, because what is a growth stock? No one knows, right?
sure.
You could have, yeah, but you could have like some shale mining company that is growing rapidly and is
Mhm.
considered a growth stock, right? So like that might not be the right. So
Technology stocks.
specifically technologies that are going to aid and abet the transition to a technological utopia. Yes, yeah.
Yep.
So
Yeah.
AI and AI adjacent stuff, robotics, space, biotechnology, healthcare, stuff like that.
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. But let's say I own all three of those, but I also own bonds and I have a shitload of cash, and, like, are there other things that I own that I should maybe consider letting go of in preparation for
Yeah,
phase
well,
2?
the 60/40 portfolio is dead, right? So the 60/40
Mm.
portfolio was 60% equities, 40% bonds, and it would basically be index-based investing, index funds, and all of that kind of stuff. I think you know, index funds, um, bonds, cash, all of these more traditional ways of investing are shit, basically. And they're not going to take you where you need to go. They just won't. Now, there may be some indexes that you could buy or some funds that you could buy that may do okay. Like maybe you invest in one of the ARK funds or maybe Tom Lee's Granny Shots fund or something like that. But very broadly speaking, um, the S&P 500 and things like that, they're not going to take you where you need to go, right? And so the
Mhm.
whole idea of just put your money in the S&P 500 or in some kind of like passive Vanguard index ETF and have some fixed income securities, bonds, and stuff like that. Like that is dead. That is bad. That's not going to get you where you need to go. You're going to get broke doing that. You're not going to get ahead. You're going to get behind. So you have to specifically think about investing differently. Now, and this is sort of where the caveat comes with real estate as well. So I am obviously a firm believer in real estate, Australian residential real estate, because we have been able to consistently help people get outsized returns that you would not get in other places. If you're not in that position, then you also want to be careful about real estate, because if you're buying real estate in, I don't know, Bolivia, right, and that is a country potentially where there's going to be massive currency collapse and all of that kind of stuff, and because we're going to find that smaller countries are going to break down much faster than larger countries, right?
Mm.
And there's going to be like central bank implosions from all of this kind of stuff. Countries that have got high debt, weak currencies, stuff like that, they're going to implode and break. Probably not a great place to own real estate. So
Yeah.
you really need to be conscientious about that. And so thinking through this, you need to really have some genuine thought into portfolio construction and how that's going to play out for you, right?
Mhm.
So but yeah, I would say the traditional kind of financial advisor model of like 40 bonds
Yep.
and index funds, ETFs, I think that's a really bad idea. That being said, I think that you should have some liquid reserves in cash or cash like equivalents, because you're still going to need some of that. But that should, and look, none of this is personal financial advice. You know, you're responsible for your own personal financial decisions are yours. So don't blame anyone else, and don't blame me if you go and do something, because I'm just a guy on the internet. But roughly like 10%, like 10% of your capital or your liquid capital in cash or cash equivalents is probably okay, and you probably take the risk on that capital being devalued because of its portability and its utility. So you have
Mm.
like some portion of it where you're just like, okay, that's just for spending and it's going to lose value, and say la vie, and that's okay. And then you offset that with other stuff as well.
Yep. I have another question that you might think is a bit of a sidestep, but I think it
Okay.
will be relevant to a lot of people that are listening who have kids, or they have teenagers or kids,
Yep.
or thinking through, because it's, we don't have kids. So I
Yep.
can imagine it's an extra weight for people thinking through, how do I set up my kids in this coming
Yep.
future? How would you recommend like maybe a teenager starts to invest? Because like I did a presentation a couple of weeks ago to a group of
Yeah.
uh, teens about investing, and I'm thinking through how to get those guys involved, or if
Yeah.
parents have kids or teenagers, how do you recommend they start to invest in this context?
So if for some reason you're not able to invest in real estate,
Mm,
either because you're not financially ready or you're not in a jurisdiction where it makes sense or for any other reason, then I would say roughly 60-40 or 70-30 Bitcoin and disruptive technology equities. That's pretty much
mhm.
how so I kind of think the 60-40 portfolio, it lives on, but in a different format in that sense, right?
Mhm.
But is it 60-40 or 70-30? I don't know. But that's in liquid invested assets. So, and that's how I would think about it. So
Yep.
yeah, I don't think it's a
Great.
sidestep at all. I think it's great because, like, if real estate is not if real estate is not a viable option to you based on where you live or your financial capability, or maybe
Yep.
you can't get any borrowing
Mortgage
capacity, or,
loan.
or
Yep.
whatever it is, if you can't invest in real estate, then the simplest way to think about it would be 60-40 or 70-30 Bitcoin. And then so 60,
Yep.
60 to 70% Bitcoin, and then the balance in disruptive technology stuff, right? So, and when I say disruptive technology or exponential age assets, I'm talking about AI, AI adjacent infrastructure, energy, robotics, space, biotechnology, you know, Web3 stuff like that. Things that are going to shape the new world. That's where you want to
Mm.
put your bets, right? And the thing with that is it's risky, and that's why it should have a smaller proportion of your portfolio. And maybe 70-30 is a better spread. I think about Bitcoin as being the risk-free rate of return.
Yeah.
So, if I'm risk averse, then I would have more Bitcoin. And if I wanted to take more risk, I'd have less Bitcoin and more equities.
Yep.
And if real estate was on the table, then maybe it's something like 35% real estate, 35% Bitcoin. And when I talk about real estate, I'm talking about like the net equity value, not the total portfolio value, because you wouldn't count the debt component of that. Maybe it's 35% real estate, 35% Bitcoin, 20% equities, and 10% liquid cash, something like that,
Mhm.
right? So, and I think we need to be distributed like that. And I also think that real estate. So if you're like, there's other ways to think about real estate too, because you can use real estate to create geographic arbitrage. And I think freedom of movement and the ability to move outside of where you live, because maybe you're in Australia and maybe there's a lot of civil unrest in Australia, and you're like, I want to get out of here. You can actually create the ability to be able to go other places. You could use real estate investing,
Yeah.
not necessarily for the financial gains, but for things like citizenship by investment or residency by investment, to create geographic arbitrage. So you've got a plan B. So you can get citizenship by investment programs in the Caribbean. You could buy a house in Antigua and Barbuda or St. Kitts and Nevis, and escape to the Caribbean if that's where you want to go. You buy a house there. Great. You've got a citizenship in another country. You can get residency by investment programs in many parts of Europe and other parts of the world as well, where you can go and buy some real estate and have access to that country. In fact, I think there's residency by investment in Thailand. I think if you spend $300,000 on an apartment or something like that, I think that
Condo.
you've got,
Yeah.
yeah, a condo or something like that, you've got residency for life. So you can just go there, right? And so that's a way. And again, so as we're thinking about these transitionary periods, it's not all monetary, right? You're talking about freedom, you're talking about prosperity, you're talking about all these other aspects. And so your ability to not just think about how am I going to maximize my financial gain, but how am I going to maximize my optionality in a world where there's potentially conflict, where there's potentially social unrest, social upheaval. How might I get myself to a place where I would want to be instead? And so creating plan B scenarios, which is one of the reasons that Bitcoin is good, because is because of its portability. You can move that with you very easily, much more easily than you can real estate. But real estate can create optionality, not just returns. And so obviously, Dashdot is helping people to build tremendous amounts of wealth through real estate, but there's other things to think about in this as well, right? And so there is an incentive over the next few years to maximize your financial returns, but then you also want to think about how are you setting yourself up to transition through phase 2 and into phase 3 as well.
Great.
Great. Awesome.
Great.
One moment.
Should we talk about our new thing that we have
Yeah,
put together for
we should
people?
talk. Yeah, we should talk about a new thing. Okay, so we are going to come back and answer some questions in a moment, but
Mm.
let me just ask you: have you enjoyed this conversation? Have you enjoyed this conversation that is broader, more macro, talking about where the world is going, technology, AI, investing, capital, crypto, all of this kind of stuff. It's a broad ranging conversation, because if the answer is yes, let us know in the chat if the answer is yes. We are starting a community. So we have just created the Investor Lab community. Gabby, are you going to share it on the screen? Are you going to share people? Share
Oh,
it or
no,
not?
I was not.
Oh, well, I can
planning
do
to.
it. I can do it. I can do it.
I thought we would
So
just dance it. Should we just dance it? Okay.
we can just dance. Let me show.
This is a
Let me
web
quick.
page.
Let me quickly share. So we have created a free community for the Investor Lab, which you are going to get an invite to join. It is free. I'm just sharing it on my screen now. Gabby, if you
There
go,
we
right, so
go.
we've created a community.
Beautiful.
It's a free community that you guys can join, where we can talk about macroeconomics of money, Bitcoin and crypto, real estate, and so much more. We've been starting to drop some stuff in here as well. This is also where you're going to find the prosperity wave thesis. Now, just forewarned is forearmed. If you're watching this today and you access this today, I'm going to actually make some updates to this document over the weekend. There's a couple of additional points that I want to get into the document, but you can access it right here, and you can download it and you can read it yourself, the entire 20-page thesis on the prosperity wave. But let me be clear on what this is and what this is not. This is not a place where it's like, come to our community and we're going to teach you all this stuff. This is not come to our community and Goose and Gabby, we're going to guru-wise ourselves and you come to our place. This is a place for you. This is not for us. This is for you. This is a place for everyone who listens to this podcast, for everyone in this community to come together and to connect with each other and to share ideas and to ask questions and to connect over a broad range of topics. Everything from, yes, real estate, but also macroeconomics of money, Bitcoin and crypto, AI and technology, lifestyle design, everything like that. This is not a Dashdot community. This is not like the Dashdot community where we're going to talk about property investing all the time and here's all the Dashdot news. And
oh my God, don't ask us about hotspots.
I mean, you can ask. Maybe. It's not the point, though. This is not a Dashdot community.
Yeah.
This is not a Dashdot community. This is not a Goose and Gabby community. This is not like come and learn our shit. This is not some course that you sign up to. It is a place where we can connect and come together and connect and have more meaningful conversations and share ideas and work through this prosperity wave and all these changes that are coming together, where we can start to bring stuff to the table and grow as a community. Because one of the big parts around this, the phase 3, and you'll read this if you read through the thesis, is there's a few things that I think are going to be really, really important, right? So building skills that can help you to navigate through the next phase, expanding your geographic flexibility, but also strengthening community resilience and leading people. So bringing people together, sharing ideas, helping everyone to navigate through this is a critical part of our social path to the other side of all of this. And so this is our little way of saying, hey, let's come together in this place and maybe we can share some ideas and maybe we can grow together, become better together, achieve more together, and really create a life of freedom, choice, and abundance together. And so if that sounds like the kind of community that you want to be a part of, then there is a sign up link in the chat right now. If you are not watching this live, we will also put a sign up link in the video description on YouTube and somehow do something like that for the podcast version audio thing. We will do that too.
In the show notes, yes.
In the show notes, is where it will be. There will be a link and you can join. Again, it is not a paid community. It is not a course. It is not a Dashdot community. It is for people like you and like us to come together, to connect, to share ideas, to grow, and to transition through these 3 phases of the prosperity wave together. So if that sounds like the kind of thing you're in for, click the link and join. There's no sales pitch. There's nothing in there. We're not making money off this. We just wanted to create a space where we can connect and share stuff.
Yeah, I'll add some context again on like why we're doing this. And I think that's hopefully, again, we really love seeing all of you that join us live and seeing the comments and things that come through. And Goose and I actually felt there's a bit of a gap, I think, because it seems like there's already such a great community that comes through in the chat. And then there's a gap in the week between Fridays. And there's always stuff that we're reading, news is happening, there's some interesting insight, there's a research thing. Goose will often spend a lot of time working just through research reports, and we put things together that we want to be able to share, but we didn't have a way that we could do that. And so, like we said, this is a free thing. It's just that we wanted a place that we could all
Yeah.
come together and we could just hang out and just share stuff. So if you're reading, come across some tweet from some politician you want to share and go like, hey, what do you think of this? Like that kind of stuff, having a place to be able to share that.
Yeah.
Hopefully this is this community is going to be that place for you, because we're reading it all the time, all of these different aspects of creating this wonderful life, trying to figure out a way that we can do it and we can help each other to achieve that as well. So I'm really looking forward to it. I'm excited because we've been planning it for the last couple of weeks. We're like starting to share stuff because we're like, oh, we just want to add more value and share and have conversations throughout it on the fly. So yeah.
Yeah, it's almost like our own little social media in a certain way to, you know, create a space
That's
where we
true.
can all,
That's true. Yep.
you know, outside of all the rest of the noise. And look, and to be
Yeah.
frank, you know, Gabby and I are human too. We're not necessarily going to be in there every single day posting and stuff like, and the community will drive the community. So this
Yep.
space, this community will be what you make of it. Okay. And so the more you connect, the more you contribute, the more you engage, the more you create the space for everybody else, the more we can all grow together. And that's really the vision we have for it. So sign up, join the conversation. It's fun already, even just Gabby and I posting stuff for each other. It's already pretty fun. So we're excited about it. Okay. And by the way, and again, the prosperity wave, what?
Sorry, will we see them on the inside?
We will see them on the inside.
We'll
finally see them on the inside. So yes. So the full prosperity wave thesis is in there. I will just again preface it by saying I'm not fully satisfied with the current draft, and I'm going to make a few updates, but the general thesis is there. And I think that from the function of sharing the idea and sharing the concept, I think it's very useful. So you can get that for free, no cost, no nothing, no whatever. Just go in there and get that in the white papers and reports section. You can also find some previous white papers and reports that we did for some previous episodes as well. So you can get that there. So please join up and we will see you on the inside in there. Before we wrap up, I'd love to go through some of the questions that have come up in this chat as well. So if it's all right, maybe I'm just going to fire through them. So
go for it.
Blake said, my only concern about Bitcoin is quantum computing. So Blake, my rebuttal to that is that Bitcoin is, I'm not even sure how many times more cryptographically secure than the traditional financial system, 5, 10, maybe 100 times more secure. So quantum computing, if quantum computing can break Bitcoin, which is currently roughly a $2 trillion asset class, when things like bonds and all of the other stuff are worth, you know, like the total investable assets in the world are about 900 trillion. I'm not sure that quantum computing is going to go after Bitcoin because it's way smaller. It'll go after the entire rest of the financial system first, and it will break that down first. Your bank accounts are not safe. The banks are not safe. Governments are not safe. All of the cryptographic structures of all of the traditional system is several orders of magnitude more fragile than Bitcoin's SHA-256 cryptography. And so if it gets to Bitcoin, everything else is already fucked, basically. So like, I don't think that is a reasonable concern. And by the way, I'm not saying that quantum computing can't break the SHA-256 cryptography, but what is already being worked on is quantum proof encryption. And the way that it works, and this is one of the beautiful things about Bitcoin, is its decentralized nature. So people can ship updates to the protocol, and then they have to be verified or validated and accepted by over 50% of the protocol users. So updates do frequently actually happen to the Bitcoin protocol, but they have to get verified and updated by and agreed to by a vast decentralized network to make it work. So by the time that quantum computing comes around and becomes a real threat, I think that we will have solved that, and everything else will collapse first anyway. So, you know, pick your poison realistically.
Before we do the next question, I just actually remembered something because everything we've been talking about in this episode, it's like a how do you make the most of your life effectively is
Yeah.
what we're trying to achieve. And I just remembered the episode that we did maybe a month or so ago on
Yeah.
how to build a life you won't regret in the next 5 years. A lot of this is super relevant as well. So that was a really good conversation. I'll put the note in the show notes as well
Yeah.
to go and revisit that one.
Yeah, totally.
Got another question?
Yep. Shampoo Time said, when I was talking about all these people that are leaving Australia, they said, where are these people going? They're going to a variety of different places where there's less taxes and less regulation. let's just leave it at that. I know people that are moving to Cyprus and Malta, people that are moving to places like Thailand, people that are moving to places like Indonesia, which is not necessarily a tax move, but less regulation. So people are moving where they can have more freedom. And that's a big deal.
This is also something that we like, it comes up in our news feeds quite a bit as well. So it's probably stuff that we'll share in the community as well, if that's of interest.
Yeah, totally. And yeah, I mean, it's definitely not a small thing to do. So, there's a question here from Peter L. Do you think that the increase in productivity from AI will grow GDP? I've heard of 10% per annum estimates. If so, wouldn't this neutralize or outgrow the massive government debt? Wishful thinking. So it's a really, really, really great question. But actually, the question is, what is the function of GDP as a measurement when you decouple labor from productivity? So actually, GDP becomes a redundant measurement mechanism because, yes, AI will increase productive output, but it's decoupled from labor. Right. And so it kind of doesn't matter if the GDP grows if everyone goes broke, because typically the relationship between GDP and productivity has also been linked to labor. So as GDP grows, typically what's happening is wealth is growing and prosperity is growing. But if you decouple labor from that equation, then you can have a growing GDP and then a declining standard of living. And so that is actually one of the downfalls. So I don't think that GDP in the future will be a useful measurement. I already think it's starting to become an irrelevant measurement for prosperity or anything like that anyway. So yes, AI will grow GDP, but no, GDP won't be an appropriate measurement. And so it doesn't neutralize government debt, by the way, right? So the like what would have to happen is the income side would need to grow linearly as well. But if you've got less people working and less taxes being paid, then you're still going to end up in the same situation. So just increasing productivity and just growing GDP is not the answer to all of this. In fact, it's just going to be another symptom of kind of papering over the cracks in a broken scenario, broken system. So, all right, what else we got in here? Super is now breaking down. Yes, agreed. Current schooling is childcare, so parents can work. Thankfully, in a position to homeschool. Nice, great work, Peter. That's great. There are a lot of people currently who benefit from the existing system who have amassed a lot of power control. I think that it has started to change already, but a lot more would be needed. Yep, 100% agree. I also think that a lot of people who have attained a lot of wealth actually also recognize the system needs to change anyway. And so I think there's obviously going to be some people who will fight against change, but I think most people recognize that change is required. And I think that you can be wealthy, and I don't think we're going to go through some, I certainly hope we don't go through some forced redistribution of wealth, like some kind of like socialist forced redistribution of wealth. I would really hope that wouldn't happen. And that's why I also think that geographic flexibility is very important. Your ability to move if some of that stuff starts to happen is very, very, very important, because you don't want to get trapped in a society where that happens. And I think that we'll still, even in the future, some people will have more than other people and everything like that. And that is okay. I think that's kind of like a natural state for things to exist in. But that can also coexist with the idea of broadly much more prosperity and abundance for everyone. So Blake said the extremes, someone who doesn't want to work or find a purpose versus someone who wants to grow, progress, or have a purpose, those in the latter would obviously be better off. Yeah, correct. I think if for people who don't want to work or find a purpose, are going to struggle. Like, I think work will still exist in the future, but I think that if you're the kind of person who isn't prone to trying to find meaning or find purpose or any of that kind of stuff, I think those people are going to be pretty challenged. So I think that's going to be part of the psychological challenge in in the Great Prosperity Reset. Is people are going to go through that, and they're going to have a crisis of meaning, and a lot of people are going to really, really, really struggle. But if we can find meaning through contribution, if we can find meaning through fulfillment, if we can seek ways to better live our life in alignment with our values, then I think we can find purpose and we can find meaning outside of the pursuit of economic gain, like that, without, because a lot of people, their purpose is tied to their work, because their work is tied to their ability to earn. Their ability to earn is tied to their ability to be a provider. Their ability to be a provider is tied to their kind of like purpose on earth to be a good parent, a good father, a good husband, a good mother, a good whatever. And so you sort of have these interlinked ideas. And if you take that away, then people are necessarily going to need to ask themselves, why am I here? What makes me happy? What does fulfillment look like for me? And by the way, next week's episode, we're going to be talking a lot about that. We're going to be talking about a lot about creating a life of fulfillment and meaning, and why you need to do it sooner than you think. So that is going to be next week's episode. One comment here, which I think is really really interesting as well, is it depends in the future. It depends on what's valued too. The purpose for a lot of kids at the moment is to grow up and be an influencer. Now, I'd like to make some commentary on that, because I think that's very interesting, because connection is a currency. So connection is valuable. And so whilst we may look at, the youth of today and be like, oh, all they want to do is make YouTube videos and become influencers. What are they actually seeking? They're seeking to connect. They're seeking like the currency of attention and connection and all of these kind of things. Now, I'm not saying that there's not problems with that. And I'm not saying that people aren't like, don't get lost in it and it can become really unhealthy. And, let's just put that aside for a second, but focus on the macro idea that actually, as we progress into the future, the desire to connect, the desire to be part of something, to have a community, to be part of a movement, to do all of that kind of stuff, digitally or physically, will become more valuable. And so what we're seeing with all of the kids that are, want to be kids, even people our age, like, it doesn't really matter, like people who are trying to create more content, be online influencers, do all of that kind of stuff. Maybe that's just a precursor to where we're going, which is actually really just a quest for people to create more connection and build community and create space. And maybe actually that's a core part of core part of this transition.
Yeah, I think because the traditional experience of school as well, it's like, I'm sure many people remember, it's like you didn't actually feel very much like your authentic self when you were at school. It was very much like trying to fit in. And I think if this experience, depending on how they're executing on a content strategy or whatever, but it's like if they're finding a way to express themselves authentically as they are and find community that appreciates them for that, then I don't see how that could be a bad thing. I think the chronically aligned stuff is something that we are just adapting to as millennials who didn't grow up like that. And I think that's something that we're all aware of. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. But like things in the future that will carry a tremendous amount of value: nature, human connection.
Yeah.
Like what carries a tremendous amount of value right now? Dollars. Okay, well, they're kind of shit, right? Like nature, plants, ocean, dirt, soil, sun, sky, connection with others, like spaces to connect and be with human beings and touch other human beings. They're going to be really high value activities in the future as we become more digital. And so the things that have value will change. You take away the need to work, and then the need to connect rises up. And so I think what you'll find is more connection, more community building, and that'll have, by the way, that'll have pros and cons, because you'll have some people that are going to be pushing extremist ideas and sort of like, there's going to be rough spots in there, right? That'll be, but we get to work through that. So Blake had a comment in here: isn't forced redistribution happening, i.e. super balances over 3 million being penalized? Well, I think it's a very good point, Blake. And my general point of view on the system is that it is actually there is actually elements of that happening right now, and I don't agree with it. Fundamentally, I don't. I think the way that the current governance systems is really, really, really chronically broken. I expressed my views on that on the last episode, but there's no need to tax the individuals. You do not need to tax the individuals of a country. You can tax the resources of a country. right? And then you can create a sovereign wealth fund and you can invest and you can do all of that kind of stuff. This also translates into the future. So let's say right now in Australia, they stopped taxing the individuals and stopped trying to redistribute people's wealth and instead taxed the common wealth, right? So if iron ore was going to be shipped to China, there was a huge tax put on that and that went into a sovereign wealth fund. And then that sovereign wealth fund was used to invest and then that was able to then pay for all of the services required for the country. Then you can have a zero tax country with a ton of abundance and prosperity and free education, free healthcare, great infrastructure, and no tax on the individuals. In addition to that, you could also have a consumption tax, which is basically you pay a tax at a point of consumption. So you buy a coffee, you pay a tax then, go to the movies, you pay a tax then. That is a way of extracting tax on a user pays basis, right? So it, if you're rich and you want to spend more money, then you'll pay more consumption tax, but they're not redistributing your wealth by taking things away from you. Like redistribution of wealth is also happening through the printing of money. It's like really not good. Like redistribution of wealth is happening in ways that are chronically sick. Now, fast forward into the future, what if Australia became a renewable energy powerhouse? Like the exponential improvement in solar technology is insane. It is one of the most insane innovation curves on the planet at the moment. And so, like, what if a country like Australia or Bhutan or Liberia, what if they produced a whole bunch of energy and then shipped that back to the grid, and then through that were able to generate credits which they could then use to develop other parts of the country, better infrastructure and everything like that. So there's ways to use the resources of a country to create the value required to service the needs of the people within the country. So I think that taking from the citizens, I think, is theft, and I think it is wrong. And so, yeah, I think that there is elements of socialist creep happening in society, and I don't think it's good. And let me be very clear: I am pro welfare. I am pro taking care of people in our community that need it, the sick, the sick and the needy, and all of that kind of stuff. Like, I don't think it's a dog eat dog, But I think we have too much government, and I think we have too much of a bent towards socialist ideals where we're taking things from people where we shouldn't be, and it's effectively theft. So I think and it just doesn't need to be that way. So, cool. Just a couple more quick ones in here. So shampoo time. My Bitcoin's currently on CoinSpot. Should I put it on a USB ledger thingy for safety, but not sure how to get it back on and exchange to make it liquid? Just to be very clear, none of this is financial advice, but just to give you a general idea, the first time you do it is the scariest. Okay. So the first time you do it, it's really nerve-wracking. But yeah, I think that when you personally custody your wealth, it's freaky as hell. It is freaky as hell because all of a sudden, for the first time, you realize you're responsible, and personal responsibility is a big deal. Like when we first moved our Bitcoin onto a cold storage wallet, it was like, oh my God, this is so intense. Like, what if we lose it? But that reality, that stress, that is also amazing. That is also amazing because it's like, oh, you've really put yourself on your own back. Like, you're carrying yourself through this world and you're not reliant on someone else to take care of your stuff. And so that self-reliance is really, it's very daunting at first. Let's just be very clear. Exchanges create third-party counterparty risk, right? So something could happen to the exchange could get hacked, the exchange could get shut down. It happens all the time. Coinbase, there was a massive hack. A lot of people lost a bunch of money. Like, it happens all the time. Not so much all the time that I think it's like, but enough that it's a problem. But then the other problem is if you self-custody, you could lose your shit. I know someone who had some Bitcoin on a wallet and they'd stored it somewhere and then they hadn't checked it for ages and they just checked and it wasn't there. And they're like, shit, has the cleaner taken it? Like it's like shit. But they still have their seed phrases and stuff. And so they can probably still recover it. So it's all good. So I think self-custody is something that's important because you can only be truly a sovereign individual when you are truly taking care of your own self in your own way. But if you do that, Charlie Vella has just made a great point. Small transactions first. So find a reliable cold storage wallet that satisfies your needs and the things you want. Do a bit of research online, buy one, go through the process, make a very small transaction in the first instance, like a fractional transaction, test it that it works. and then try and send it back again as well, right? Because it's actually a lot easier than once you get the hang of it, it's super easy. It's just like, okay, address here, address there, bang, bang, off we go. The first time you do it, it's like, it's crazy. And it's like going on a roller coaster for the first time. It's like, oh my God, this is insane, you know? And so, but going through that process, I think is really, really a worthwhile exercise to do. So don't be scared. Just play small. Just like move a really small amount in the first instance and keep yourself safe. That's what I would say. Blake has also got a comment here. Human-made things might become more valued because if everything is made from AI, the imperfect may be valued over the perfect. I absolutely agree with you, Blake. I absolutely agree with you. I think that AI can produce art. AI can produce music. In fact, the number one most streamed song on Spotify recently was an AI created music, AI created band.
Is it?
And so, yeah. And look, part of the reason it became the most streamed is because everyone kept going, oh my God, look at this AI music. And then everyone streamed it and it kind of, you know,
Good
kind
hook.
of self-fulfilled its own prophecy. But
Yep.
you know, I use AI to create art as well. And I actually like the art and I think it's nice. And so I think that you can do that, but I think that craft, as in like the ability for you to go and make something with
Yeah.
your human spirit, human soul, human hands, will carry
Yep.
more intrinsic value in some way over time as well. And I think that these are really important things. And I think that when you're in a when you're in a deflationary environment, the quality of goods and the desire for quality goes up, because if your money is worth more in the future than it is today, then the things you buy, you want them to be very high quality and to last a really long time. And that's why craftsmanship in the past was actually so highly valued. That's actually why there was better quality craftsmanship historically than we have today, because people would want, if they're going to buy something, it better bloody last a couple of generations, you know, like it better be very good. And so high quality craftsmanship was you know, is really valued. So I think that that's definitely going to continue.
Yep.
Nice. Cool. I think that's about all we
Cool.
got for today, Gabby.
I think so. I'm glad you went through and whipped through a bunch of those questions. They're good questions.
Yeah, they were good. So just as a quick recap, let us know if you've enjoyed this episode. Let us know if you've enjoyed the Prosperity Wave thesis. Let us know in the chat. It'd be great to hear from you. If you're not watching this live, let us know in the YouTube comments or wherever else you are watching this. We do read the comments. We do get back to you. At least I think so. I read them some of the time. I think Gabby responds. And if you want to connect with us directly and be part of the community as well, then you can join the Investor Lab community. There is a link in the chat. We will put a link in the show notes and the video description and all of that kind of stuff. You can join the Investor Lab and see you in there. And again, the community is not about us. It's definitely not a Dashdot community. It is about you and about the community we can build together. So let's get in there. See you on the inside.
See you on the inside.